on a lot of these places along the south coast, water sort of just oozes out into the sea. I reckon, survival situation, fresh water. Let's give it a crack. Also the fact that it has mosquito larvae in it. They only live in fresh water. Oh, I don't want too many larvae. No, definitely salty.
G'day guys, this weekend I'm travelling down south. We're making our way at the moment, but this time I'm travelling with, or driving with, our fellow YouTuber and four-wheel drive specialist Alex from Intense. He's got a YouTube channel, and I will stick the link down below and at the end of the video. But Alex, thanks for coming along, and what's the rough plan for this weekend?
So the rough plan is up there is the top Cape Dunsborough, and down there is Augusta. And so we're going between there, travelling Caves Road and taking all these little tracks to the coast. We're going to find you some good photo locations.
Excellent. So I suppose what we're looking for are those little hidden gems just off the beaten track. There's down south, it's quite popular, and so we've both got four-wheel drives. Alex has got the Patrol. Of course, you've seen my Ford Ranger. And so we're just going down some of the four-wheel drive tracks that I've never actually been down. Alex has been down some of them, but others, it's a new experience for both of us. But what we're really trying to find is spots just like this one, out against the coast. We've got nice little lagoons and rock formations that might make a nice composition either later this afternoon or this evening or early tomorrow morning for a sunrise or a sunset. We have got some weather on the way. Evidently a front is coming through, so we just have to play it by ear that way. But we're down for a couple of nights, so who knows what we're going to get.
That little thing there, the ARB Easy Deflate, had it for years. So it's got your pressure gauge obviously, and you screw that onto your tyre valve. And this little bit here, you hold that steady and you unscrew that, and that actually removes the valve core from your tyre. And then you just pull this back and forth to control how much air goes in and out, and you can drop to whatever pressure you want. It takes about 10 seconds per tyre. So I'm going to 28 psi all round. I generally go maybe 20 to 22 for beach and coastal tracks, but I'm going a little bit higher because of the nature of this drive. We're going to be on and off the tarmac all the time. You don't want to drive on low tyres on the tarmac, so we're going somewhere in the middle there, so I can still drive at a reasonable speed at 28, but it'll still protect the tracks from damage, stop my tyres getting damaged, and make the four-wheel drive do four-wheel drive hell of a lot better.
Come across this spot where we could park the cars. We got out and we've come down to the coast just to have a bit of a scout around. The light at the moment is a little bit too harsh to actually take a shot, but we're just exploring these little bays and nooks just for something that might catch our eye for later this afternoon or this evening. So we're on the quiet side of this little miniature cape, so we're protected from the wind, and there's a really nice bay here. So we thought we'd come down here, have a bit of a poke around and see whether we could find some foreground interest that would anchor an image in the foreground and have the arc of the bay coming around from the right hand side. It's not looking too bad. There's quite a lot of seaweed here, so we're going to have to negotiate that a little bit. But of course this is only our first stop, so yeah, just checking it out. weather started moving in, and just minutes later we found ourselves in the middle of a shower. So we decided to hop back in the cars and move on. We had a bit more of an explore around that area and we found some interesting spots, but we decided to move on a little bit south because that was what our plan was. There's this little area just out the back of the Boranup Forest. We saw the tracks on the map, so we thought we'd dive down here and just check it out. By the looks of the sky, we've got two types of cloud. We've got a low cloud and we've got a high cloud. The high cloud is the stuff that I'm really interested in because that's the stuff that's going to catch the light. The low cloud doesn't seem to be too dense, so hopefully it'll let the sun shine through and we'll get a little bit of colour on our scene. That's the plan. So we're going to have a bit more of a scout just around here. We've got a couple of spots picked out just around the corner here on the other side of this rock that we'll check out, see what the composition is like, and then when we've set up, we'll get back to you. So we walked across a couple of fairly large rocks and boulders, and we've eventually found our spot where we're going to take our first shot, and perhaps the only one, because look, the conditions we thought were going to be a little bit better. We've got a bank of cloud on the horizon, which means that the sun is going to set quite soon. We've got a very bright sky while the sun is still up in the sky, and so therefore I've needed a couple of filters on the front to bring down the light. I've got a 0.6 and a 0.9 hard graduated filter. As I said, we're standing on this ledge and we're about 2.5 meters above this reef, or a lower level of rock, which just gets smashed by water with every wave. And then around about 5 meters away from us, there are a cluster of boulders with a little bit of algae on it. They look really, really good, and they're grouped together, so that's the main part of my subject. And the waves come bursting through those rocks, and all the foam makes this terrific pattern in the foreground. I've noticed that these rocks that are clustered together, that are sitting on this rock shelf below us, are all the same colour. And so just a shot on its own, you lose where the rocks are. They just look like they're part of the shelf. So what I'm doing is I'm waiting for the right wave to push enough water through to so that there's enough of the white foam, just like now. Excuse me. So what I'm doing is I'm waiting for enough water to come bursting through the rocks so that the rocks are actually surrounded by that white foam moving around. That's when I'm taking my shot. That white foam and the pattern that makes over 1/4 or 1/3 of a second gives me separation between the rock shelf below us and the rocks that sit on it. Okay, so where am I focused? I'm focused on those central rocks in the middle. It's a pretty easy one. I'm just finding a spot where there's some contrast, putting the focal point there and getting focus. So with that setup, I'm on ISO 64. My aperture is, I'm playing around anywhere between f9 and f11, pretty much so that I can control the amount of light and keep my shutter speed at somewhere between 1/3 and 1/4 of a second. At the moment, it's 1/3 of a second. Why 1/3 of a second? It's because of the amount of water and the speed at which that water is moving. I'm wanting some detail. I'm trying to create some real drama to match the drama that I'm getting in the sky. I'm getting some beautiful drama in the sky with the clouds. I want to get some drama in amongst those rocks in the foreground as well. Anyway, I'll show you the image now. So as you know, Alex is with me. He's got his own YouTube channel, lots to do with camping and four-wheel driving and just basically getting out there and enjoying yourself. So make sure that you do go over and check out his channel. We're just going to go over now and check out what setup he's got and what he thinks of the conditions and the location that we found for this afternoon's sunset.
Well, hell of a good spot, isn't it? I've got reasonably basic equipment, I suppose, compared to Andrew anyway. Nikon D750, Tamron 24 to 70 f2.8, and you know, I get by with what I can. Main thing is I'm out here having fun. I've been taking pictures of the outdoors since I was a teenager, and yeah, just like seeing what I can get. Good spot.
It's been a great day of shooting. It was a really nice sunset. We've decided to stay at Contos, which is just a little bit north of where we've been shooting. It's actually technically, I think, still in the Boranup Forest. So we're going to relax, cook up tea, and I think we're going to record some footage for Alex's videos. I think he's going to do a review on a fire pit. So if you're interested in that, head over to Alex's channel and check that out. Good morning. This is our second day with Alex from Intense. We had a slow morning, which is pretty good. We did a little bit of filming of the campsite and stuff like that. So Alex has actually done a video on my camping setup. So if you want to see more of that, then head over to his channel and check that one out. So this morning's plan is to go north up the coast and just to do a little bit more exploring. Our first stop is Redgate, which is really popular with the surfers. But we're here for a couple of reasons. We're trying to check out another couple of spots for a sunset later this evening. We've got some interesting rocks, some boulders. There's Isaac Rock, I think, out in the middle of the ocean. We're just wondering whether that might make an interesting shot. And then just further around to my left, there's where the actual beach is, where they surf. There's a river that comes out, and we're thinking that that might make a nice leading line for an image. But there's a lot of people there at the moment, so it's a bit difficult to work out. But we're just checking that out, and then we're going to head further north for some more exploring. So we continued to head north, and we've come to a little place called Ellensbrook, and we're just checking out the homestead. It's got a very strong Aboriginal background. It's quite an unusual place, not similar to the landscapes around this area. There's a nice little brook that's obviously carving its way through the property, and there's a path that we're following along that brook and just checking out some of the scenes. One of the platforms that it comes to is this one here, and you might be able to pick out behind me is a limestone cave or a structure that obviously at some time of the year the water comes out of that and feeds into this little brook. Lovely little spot. The water isn't running at the moment, but you could see potential here as an interesting shot. But we're just going to soak up the atmosphere, check out some of the other spots here, and then move on. So these sandy tracks do get a little bit boggy in places. We've found an area that it's just got all these, not ruts necessarily, but just holes along the tyre tracks. Alex was able to make it up reasonably easily, but my Ford Ranger struggled the first time. I don't think I had enough momentum, but the second time one of the tyres just dug in. I was doing so well.
You've come to a halt.
What was it?
You just
that wheel's in the air.
Yeah, you just dug a bit of a hole here. Good old wombat holes strike again. I don't know why they call them wombat holes. We don't even get those things here. Extracting the Ranger, part 1. It'll be easy. Ranger extraction complete. Momentum didn't carry you through the first time. I reckon don't make the mistake of thinking more momentum's going to help you here.
Yeah, okay.
Putting that rear diff locker on.
Yep.
Because what happened was, yeah, you ran out of flex and lost traction on one of those wheels, and that was it. Now that we've got a diff locker on in the rear, the same momentum, maybe even a little bit less, you might get away with.
Yep.
Bugs are on me. And yeah, we'll rely on that diff locker to make the difference.
Excellent.
Interesting experiment. We'll see how it goes. Bit dusty, but diff locker did it all. Well, what we had there was, they call them wombat holes, and it's where people have spun their wheels, and wheels always spin in an alternate sort of diagonal pattern, and so you get all these offset holes. And then if you get a wheel spinning in the air, you lose drive, you're going nowhere. Because you've got a diff lock, it makes both of those back wheels turn at once, and so even if he's just got one of those wheels having traction, the other one in the air, there's going to be forward momentum, and as you can see, it pushed him through. Good outcome.
What made this a little bit tricky was that it was round a corner, it's soft sand, and then it's also uphill, so you do lose a little bit of momentum, but it's good to know that that rear diff lock made all the difference. Anyway, we're going to keep on heading south, see what we can find. Really interesting track. So we've had a bit of fun this afternoon just exploring some of the tracks down this coast, but in the end we decided to come back to one of the spots that we had seen. It's not the first spot, it's one of the second or third spots that we kind of looked in at. There's a couple of little lagoons, there's some nice rock formation. I think we're going to get a pretty nice image. What we're trying to do, there's a whole scramble of rocks that are scattered probably across the next 30 or 40 meters of beach, and it's a bit of a mess, I must admit. So the challenge is to try and find a composition where there's maybe a single rock or maybe a couple of rocks that kind of create some order, maybe a line or something like that, that will draw the viewer into the image. Anyway, we're going to go for a bit of an explore and try and find a composition like that. When I've found something, I'll walk you through it. So Alex and I have been scouting these rocks for about an hour or so, trying to look for different compositions, and he was asking me what I look for in a composition, and so I thought I might share some of the points that I was making to him. No doubt the reason why we're here, the reason why we selected this area, was because of the rocks. They're granite rocks that have been eroded and worn down over many years. But I just love the patterns and the lines that are in the rocks, and so I wanted one or two of the rocks in the foreground with those patterns and lines on them. They're an amazing an array of colour. There's blacks and oranges and browns that hopefully will come out nicely in post-processing. The sun is setting directly out to the west, and it is so tempting to just point the camera straight out to the sun. At the moment, the sun is just a couple of minutes away from setting, and there's some rays that are coming through the clouds just before the sun dips below the horizon. But it's so small, it's beautiful to look at, but with a wide angle, those objects way off in the distance are just going to look so small. Plus, in comparison to all of the dark shadows in the foreground and the rocks, it's going to be blown out. It's going to be really tricky. We had a go at shooting that last night. Tonight we're going to shoot something slightly different. The other challenge that we've got is we've got some big waves that you might be able to hear smashing up against some of the boulders that are just on the water's edge, and they are flicking some spray towards us, so we're having to be a little bit careful about the amount of spray that we get on our lens. I'm checking and wiping the lens all of the time, just to prevent those water drops or spray drops hitting the lens and just messing up the image. It's so hard to get rid of them in post-processing that I try as hard as I can to make sure that the lens is clear of any water. But in terms of composition, I am pointing directly north now along the coast, and I found this lovely little pool of water. And it's got a couple of rocks in the foreground which are quite close to the camera that have got those lines that I was talking about, these amazing lines, and they go in different patterns. There's even one of the rocks that have got the lines are creating circles. So I've got that in my foreground, and what I'm trying to do is time it nicely so that I've got some side light from the sun hitting some clouds that are in the sky, and that's where I'm going to get my colour in the sky. It's not as bright as if I was pointing directly out into the sunset, but I've still got a difference in the amount of light. I've got two choices. Either I bracket the shot, so one shot for the foreground and one shot for the sky, or I can put a filter on there. So I've decided to put my Lee mount on there. I've got the polarizer on there to cut through some of the glare so that the patterns in the rocks that are just underneath the water come through. And I've got a hard grad because the horizon is quite flat. It's a 0.6, I'll just check that. Yep, 0.6 hard graduated filter, which is just cutting out some of the light and it's making a more even exposure across the image. I'm on ISO 64, my aperture is f11 because I haven't got anything too close to the camera, so f11 gives me plenty of depth of field. And my shutter speed is half a second, which is fine because I'm waiting for there to be no wave, so I'm not getting any of the spray, and so the water in front of me is quite still also. So half a second is fine. I'll show you the shot now.